Hi and welcome to Totem Talks. Today we're going to be talking about networks and networking, and with me I have Mark Valentine from Mayor Brown. Hi Mark.
Hi Gary.
Can you just explain what your role is at Mayor Brown, please?
Yeah, sure. I'm the Head of Business Development.
Yep.
That basically entails managing the business development and the marketing team in supporting the lawyers at Mayor Brown winning new work.
And how long have you been there?
It's coming up to 2 years nearly.
Okay. And before Mayor Brown?
So I'm new to law.
Okay.
I was previously in accountancy.
Yep.
So I spent about 12 years working for a couple of firms in accountancy, and prior to that I was in banking.
Okay, so I'm clear, when we're talking about networks and networking, are we talking about organisations, business to business networking, or individual networking?
I think that's a really good question, Gary. I'm a great believer that people do business with people.
Okay.
And that old adage that it's who you know, not what you know, is vitally important. And I think in your private life, you will know people who may also cross over into your business life.
Okay.
So it's important to think the two as joined.
Okay, and why is it so important?
Well, we're all in business. We're all ambitious individuals. And I think if you can develop your network so that you have people who can help you, either from a work perspective or a personal perspective, then that's got to be part of your own development.
Okay, so how do you go about networking? Where do you start?
I coach quite a few people and colleagues and people I mentor, and one of the things that I have as a consistent message to them is that they must build relationship maps. So by relationship map I mean the people you know and how important they are to either your career or your work environment. And the way I start that is to think of you in the centre of the world.
Yep.
Around you there are primary influences. So these are people who will have an impact on your career. So it might be your line manager, it might be a particular partner you're working with directly, or maybe somebody outside who can support you from a development perspective. Other primary influences are people like your wife or your husband or your partner. They have some influence in your personal life, so it's important that you consider them as a primary influencer in your network.
Okay.
And so that builds. So you build a map of all the people who are important in your world, either from a personal perspective or a career perspective or from a work perspective. Beyond that, you think about secondary influences. So if I may be so bold, I might consider you as a secondary influencer.
Okay.
I've known Totem, previously First Council, for a number of years now, and when I've looked to move career, you've kind of been there.
I was hoping to be a primary, to be honest, Mark.
You need to work a bit harder for that.
Okay. Okay. And do you have target people on this map? So we're talking people you know, or do you add in people you'd like to be in a network, or is that a whole different?
I think it's both. We all know people. So you put them into the primary influencer space, but there may be people who you might not have a strong relationship with. Yeah. I think back to the times when I was a more junior member of staff. There were senior people in organisations that I worked in that I would consider to be people that I need to get to know better, okay. And I would therefore put them into the primary influencer space. Okay.
And the people you mentor and coaches, do they find that so far easy? I mean, do you find it unnatural to do this sort of map of people?
The initial starting of the map is quite easy because you just put down the people you know and you think are important, and certainly when I mentor people I would work with them to get them to just think a bit wider about who the primary influencers are.
Yeah, okay. And so people you know, I understand. What about people that you don't know? I mean, where do you start?
Okay. About 12 years ago I was working with some accountants at the time, and I was asked to try and define what business development was. At the time I thought that was a little odd because I thought everyone knew what business development was, but when they started to explain that they didn't really understand, was it about events? Was it about marketing brochure? Was it about relationships? It was clear that they didn't really have an understanding of what I was asking them to do and what I was helping to support them do. Okay. So I came up with a very simple definition which I think encapsulates what business development is. And it's all about creating and maintaining mutually beneficial relationships. Yep. So that piece around the relationships was the key in trying to define what business development was, yep. Which helped them understand a little bit more about what they were supposed to be doing, okay. In this BD space.
Okay. And a specific example of you doing this at any point in your career, which you can point to as, this is how it bore fruit.
Yeah, a few years ago I was at a dinner So the organisation I was working with held quite a prestigious dinner for some industry leaders in a particular area. And I was sat next to the chairman of a building society at the time. And the conversation was going fine, and I said to him, you know, how do you find working with XYZ company? And he turned to me, and I won't use the expletives he used, but he was basically saying it wasn't a very good relationship they were having. Now at that point I could acknowledge that and turn away and talk to the person next to me, or I could be curious and try and find out a bit more about what was troubling him. So I maintained the conversation. I asked a few more questions to try and understand a bit more about what was going on. And as a consequence, I committed to doing some follow-up to that. And I think the network's only ever good if you follow up. Yeah. So I went back to the office the next day and talked to one of the senior partners, and we agreed that we'd take a course of action to try and develop that relationship so it was a bit stronger than it obviously was at the current state. Yeah. We did that. 12 months down the line, we were billing around about £250,000 on that account. Okay. Wow. So simply by being curious, not being afraid to ask the question, and importantly following up with something that was meaningful to the particular client.
So do you need to always have something to offer someone to take to a networking meeting or call?
I don't think you do, Gary. I think we need to be careful not to confuse networking with sales opportunities. Yeah. You know, if you've made a cold call or you've agreed to meet somebody, then it may be the case that you need to take something with you. I'm a great believer, though, that, you know, take yourself and sell yourself. You don't need brochureware to do that. And often, you know, it's a bit of a comfort blanket, which I think people don't really need, but it's there because they feel they have to use it. Networking for me is more about conversation, dialogue, asking lots of questions, finding out what's important to particular individuals, determining whether, if it's a new person you've met, that individual needs to be in your network or not. Because I think this is the other thing that we need to be careful of. You go along to an event that's organised by your firm, and there's an assumption that you need to network with everyone in that room. That's not always the case. You know, a good networker will work the room and determine the people that they then want to do some follow-up with. Yeah.
No, I've attended briefings where there's certain partners who you can tell that there's 2 or 3 people that they've come in a room knowing that they need to talk to, and they talk to those people, and they're not there that long, but they've done everything. No,
there's some very. I always remember there was a firm. Don't mind mentioning it's BDO. There's a partner at BDO who he works a room brilliantly, and the way he does it is he'll have a conversation with somebody, and he will take that individual to another person, and will then deposit them on that person, and then move to
all pre-planned.
No, it's
just
natural to him. Just very, very good at not just moving himself around the room, but moving other people around the room. So he's actually introducing opportunity to other partners.
But I assume you can't train that person to be able. You've got to be naturally, curious. You've got to be a certain type of person to do that. You can't go around to your partners and make them be that person.
You've got to be curious. You've got to want to do it, and importantly, I think you've got to be not afraid to do it. It's not difficult. You know, we're all human beings. We all have interactions at all levels. You know, whether it's down the pub and you meet someone down the pub and you have a conversation with them, or whether it's at the school gates when you're dropping the kids off. You know, how many of us have done that?
And don't know what those people do. Or,
Exactly.
You say hello 10 years later, you're not sure what they do, or they could be anyone, couldn't they?
I used to get the mick taken out of me because I used to talk to people on trains. Wow. So I have a commute in from Lincolnshire every day, and part of what I enjoy doing is just meeting new people on the train and finding out what they do.
And do people think you're odd when you start talking?
They do, yes. Yes. But it leads to opportunity. You know, you build relationships, you build friendships, and they can lead to work opportunities. So having had a bit of a sales background, I've always got one eye on where's the opportunity. And it works. And just have a personality.
So you've got your network. How do you maintain that? I mean, how do you make sure that there aren't people you've got in touch with who then drift away again? It shrinks. Yeah,
great question. It's a lot easier these days with some of the tools that are out there on computers and things. I always remember a colleague of mine, Ian Simpson at BDO, we got talking about Facebook one day, and I just didn't get Facebook, didn't understand it, didn't see why or how. And he kind of explained to me. So he said, how often have you moved jobs? And I said, well, I was from Newcastle, moved to London, moved to Peterborough, moved to Birmingham. So how many friends did you make in that process? So well, I made a few friends in Newcastle because I lived there. He says, how many of them do you still talk to? I said, none of them. He said, right, you're a typical bloke. You
because
move
I've
on,
moved on. Yeah.
and you don't keep in touch with people. And what Facebook is about is actually keeping in touch.
Yep.
So it maintains that network. On a business level, you've got tools like LinkedIn. So you connect with somebody a few years ago, provided they connect with you, then you've got permission to play. You know, if at some point in the future you need to reach out to that individual, then you're connected through that medium of LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And you can broadcast what you're doing so people can find out what you're doing. So I'm a great believer in using the tools that you've got to maintain relationships. There is no substitute for face-to-face. I'm a great believer in looking people in the eyes and getting the metal of them. But obviously with the networks being so large these days, it's not always possible to do that. So you know, use the tools that are available to you.
And assume if you're in touch with someone regularly and you don't want something, then that's better than just being quiet and being that obvious person who gets in touch out the blue when they clearly want something. That's not networking, is it?
Yeah, there's a lot of cynical people in the world, isn't there? So, you know, if you reach out to somebody who's, you must forgive me for using the word reach out. I work with Americans.
No,
and
no,
I've
that's
inherited that.
no, I understand that.
You don't always be wanting, be giving. You know, give something back.
Yeah.
You know, share content, share information, and use the network as you would want it to use you.
Okay. So if you were giving one piece of advice or tip to people who want to be better at networking, what would you say?
Don't be afraid.
Okay.
I think, you know, there's a lot of fear around speaking to people you don't know. You don't need to be afraid. You know, generally at any event where you're meeting lots of different people, they're there because they want to be social, they want to be engaged with.
Yeah.
So go and talk to them and listen.
Okay. Yeah.
Importantly.
Thanks very much. Thanks a lot, Mark. Appreciate
Thanks,
it. Okay. That's it for this edition of Totem Talks. Get networking. Thank you.